What does the coronavirus, 9/11 terrorist attacks, Barron Trump, and the Titanic all have in common with each other? Well, a popular conspiracy theory says they were all predicted in popular media before having actually happened. You've probably heard about the Dean Koontz novel, it's called Eyes of Darkness, and how it seems to have eerily predicted the coronavirus outbreak almost 40 years before it happened. Or what about the TV show The Simpsons? Why does this particular cartoon series seem so good at foreshadowing actual events long before they've come true in real life? Is it just a coincidence, or is there some truth to the fringe conspiracy theory known as predictive programming? In this video, we're going to explore what predictive programming is. Is it real, or is it just some crackpot theory? If it is real, then what's its purpose? Why does it show up in art and music and cartoons and books, movies and TV, and even in advertisements? Keep watching because I'll be showing you some amazing examples of possible predictive programming in popular media. What is predictive programming? Alan Watts writes a lot about this. He has some interesting blog posts, and he's done a lot of work on predictive programming. I like this. He said that Hollywood is the magician's wand, which has been used to cast a spell on the unsuspecting public. Things or ideas that would otherwise be seen as bizarre, vulgar, undesirable, or impossible are inserted into films and TV. And you know, when you do that, you make them safe. Because in other words, you're putting these ideas into the realm of fantasy. It's not real, it's safe, it's just for entertainment, it's just fun. But that's actually how social engineering supposedly works. Okay, so when you're watching any film or TV show, your mind is totally left open to suggestion, and a conditioning process can begin if they wanted it to. You might think this part sounds crazy, but this is not even the weird part, guys. And by the way, I actually believe that this part at least makes total sense. It seems to be almost intuitive to me. I mean, isn't art supposed to be like this? Like good art? It's supposed to change you, right? Change the way that you think about the world, or the way that you see yourself or your place in the world. Changes the way that you look at things and the way that you feel about things. So that makes sense. That makes sense that this part would work, and that if you wanted to and you understood psychology enough, you could use art and popular media to affect change. And now I want you to think about how much TV has actually changed the social landscape in this country. It's changed political trends in the United States for sure. Look at how much the country's changed in the last 60 years, okay? I'll give you an example. Gay characters. If you go back to the beginning of the sitcom history, in the 50s and the 60s, there's definitely no gay characters. It was like they didn't exist. Even though there were gay people, you did not see gay people on TV, right? And then beginning in the 70s, there started to be jokes and innuendos that were used to kind of imply that a character was gay, or that they were talking about someone that was gay, but they never really came out and said it. In fact, they didn't really use the term gay on TV very much. In the late 70s, I think Billy Crystal was in the sitcom Soap, and he actually was the first gay character on TV, but that didn't happen until 1977. And then even in the 80s and stuff, it really wasn't so prevalent. You didn't really see any major supporting gay characters or anything like that. But nowadays, look at the TV. There's hardly a show that doesn't have some kind of gay character. And a lot of the characters on, the most popular shows include gay characters. Look at Modern Family, right? There's a couple that's raising children that are gay on that show, and they're portrayed as a totally normal family. In fact, I know it's a sitcom and the ridiculous things happen and stuff, but the point is they're showing you that it's normal and acceptable while they're entertaining you, right? And that's pretty much how this whole TV thing kind of works. I mean, it has changed. Look at the popularity for gay marriage. Back in 1996, only 27% of the country was open to the idea of legalizing gay marriage. Nowadays, you'll be drummed out of a university, you could be fired from your job, definitely be silenced and called a bigot or a hater if you even imply that marriage should be between a man and a woman. The next thing that you're really going to start to see is the trans movement in TV. Start watching for it, because transgenderism and drag queens are all over the media now. Most networks have some kind of drag queen themed show. Turn on Netflix, half of the shows there promoting drag queens and transgender rights and everything like that. And like I said, this is not supposed to be some kind of anti-gay rant or anything, but I think this illustrates pretty well how you can use popular entertainment to kind of change the landscape and change people's mindsets. So basically what they're doing is dropping clues to what we should be accepting now in the future under the guise of entertainment. And it really wouldn't be that hard to orchestrate. There's 1,500 newspapers, 1,100 magazines, 9,000 radio stations, 1,500 TV stations, and 2,400 publishers that are owned by only 6 companies. So that wouldn't take as much orchestration as most people think if you wanted to get them all on the same page, plug in the same message. And don't you think that the people that are in charge, if they wanted to, that they would know that when you watch television, your brain enters into an alpha state and that makes you suggestive as hell? Advertisers know this, politicians know this, and governments know this. Also, the more relaxed you are, the more open to suggestion you actually are. So comedies and sitcoms are the perfect vehicle and that offers the best programming opportunities to tap into someone's subconscious. And that might be why all the groundbreaking stuff happens first in the sitcoms. For one thing, you could also play it off as it's safe. Like a lot of times Saturday Night Live used to start out poking fun of the same ideas that they believe in now. And I wonder, like, were they probably always held those views, but they poke fun at it just to enter it into the public sphere, into the conversation. And like I said, I mean, you're definitely susceptible when your subconscious is relaxed, when you're watching sitcoms. So predictive programming is a type of mass mind control, right? But is it one that is only for conditioning people to change their attitudes and behaviors and to accept things? Or is it more forward thinking? Does it want you to accept future events? Now you're probably thinking like, wait, what are the planned future events? And that's the whole real conspiracy side of this social engineering, is that they're showing us clues of things that are coming down the pipeline that they want us to get ready for and that they want us to begin to accept now before they happen. The theory behind this is basically that the powers that be are going to leak details of pre-planned societal changes. They're going to intentionally reveal what they want for us through various forms of media. It's a type of propaganda where they're actually foreshadowing what's going to happen and thereby preemptively minimizing your resistance. They are hoping that by repeatedly exposing you to the same themes that they're going to wear you down to a state of passive acceptance. And by the time the actual changes begin to materialize in your life, very few people in the world are going to be questioning it, let alone prepared to fight back against it, okay? And like I said, I'm still considering this a conspiracy theory. I'm not trying to convince you to believe in it, but I want to expose you to it. If predictive programming was going to work as a valid form of a psychological conditioning program, a few things have to be true in order for that to work. One is that there has to be a group of powerful people with a shared goal that must have influence over the entertainment industries. I already showed you earlier that a vast majority of the media companies in this country and in the world are owned by just a handful of companies. So that part could actually be arranged, right? That's doable. But who would the powerful people be and what would they want? Well, I tend to think, honestly, that there are groups of these New World Order types. I'm not saying that they're the most prevalent. I don't think that the Illuminati or the Masons are behind everything. But I do think that, look, the entire wealth and power of the world, do you think that they're just going to leave it up to some dumb voters to decide what is going to happen? I mean, we see people steal and kill for little things, right? Start wars for little things. They're going to leave all this massive amounts of power, especially when they have the tools and technology to really get in there and control the future and control us. They're just going to leave that up to chance? No. I mean, it's obvious that there are people and groups out there that exist for that. Like, look at the Fabian socialists. Look at some of this research, the New World Order, globalists. It sounds like crackpot stuff, but there is some validity to it. And I'd also tell you, if you haven't checked out A Call for an Uprising, it's a YouTube channel. That guy has a lot of good information about what's going on in Hollywood and about some of this New World Order stuff that is in the entertainment industry. Now, I don't agree with everything that he has to say, but I do think he's right about a whole lot, and it's worth checking out. So I think both of those things exist. There's the ability to control the media, and there are groups out there that would want to do it. 2, people are less likely to resist socially engineered changes if they've already become familiar with them. So we talked about the gay marriage thing and how that was becoming more and more prevalent in the media, and that corresponded with a shift in the acceptance. And now we're seeing it with the transgenderism. And I think, within the next 20 years and stuff, anyone that isn't willing to say that a man is a woman and a woman is a man, or that, you know, sex is malleable, is going to be as old-fashioned as somebody that held like terrible racist views from back in the old days. Like, that's the way you're going to be seen. And I think that this stuff is powerful and it really works. And so anyway, you're getting exposed to this stuff, right? And I think that using the gay marriage and transgenderism is just one of hundreds of examples I can come up with. Like, how about training you to see guns and gun ownership as bad and weird or dangerous? That'll make it easier to ban guns, to buy them back, to confiscate them. A lot of movies and shows and stuff, like, they show it's just the villains with the guns. And a lot of the TV shows, there's morals about doing something, fighting back against evil corporations and perceived NRA and things like that. So that is out there. Or how about the way that Christians are portrayed in most films, right? Christians are hypocrites. They're cold, judgmental, backsliders. The only time that Christians are ever shown in kind of a positive light in most media is if they're either holding like a real watered down version of Christianity, or if they're willing to bend and change on some of their held notions and give them up. 3, messages planted in fiction can range in terms of, you know, how subtle it is. Okay? From subliminal to major plot lines. And I got some good examples of both of those, especially when it comes to 9/11 and some of the major plot lines that were exposed there. And I'm going to show that to you in just a minute. But they don't have to be showing you huge social changes either. I mean, certain events, certain small events could be foreshadowed as well. The last thing is that the context of the event or the character's response to the event is not as important as just merely planting the seed in your mind. And so that is a big part of the social engineering, is just to get you exposed to the idea so that it's not new. It's not hitting you out of left field. I mean, think about it. Like, if you had a time machine and you went back to the 70s or the 80s and you tried to explain to people about different transgender bathroom bills, or about like biological men competing in women's sports, like, they would think that's crazy. It doesn't matter. The most liberal college professor at that time or any Democrat would tell you that that's an insane thing, right? But to us, it almost sounds normal because we've been used to it and we've been exposed to it. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about getting you used to predictive programming. Now, 9/11, there's a treasure trove of little clips, TV shows, all kinds of stuff from popular media that has been exposing 9/11 or supposedly foreshadowing 9/11, like The Simpsons. Man, The Simpsons have predicted a lot of stuff. Conspiracy theorists love to go crazy with The Simpsons. You know, they predicted everything from Donald Trump running for president to possibly 9/11. Back in 97, there's an episode where the Simpson family goes on a trip to New York, and Bart has this magazine that shows the Twin Towers, and the price tag that you can see on there is 9, but it looks like a 9/11 when you put those two together. So that is weird. You know, it could be a coincidence, but that one is definitely interesting. And like I said, just the history of the show, The Simpsons, they always have been one of the shows that seems to have this uncanny ability to kind of predict the future. There was books. This one was written in 83 that shows the building burning and collapsing. Now I get it. It's a huge iconic structure in New York City. So maybe people just have always imagined what would happen if these buildings broke or burned or whatever. But it's weird how much art and media and stuff like that shows something tragic happening to these buildings. Now, I think the most compelling case for predictive programming, if I was going to buy totally into the theory, has to be the pilot episode from the Lone Gunman series. It was a spinoff of X-Files, and in this pilot episode, keep in mind, aired March 2nd, 2001. But the whole plot of the pilot episode is about a false flag attack and a plane flying into the World Trade Center, or World Trade Towers. So, I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy how close that is. And I mean, a lot of people have talked about the possibility that 9/11 didn't happen the way that we're told, and that, you know, like Operation Northwoods, you can research that, how the government had in the past been interested in possibly doing a false flag attack to get us into a war or to limit our freedoms. I mean, the Patriot Act came out after or in response to 9/11. So watch this clip from the Lone Gunman.
We know it's a war game scenario, that it has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is it important enough to kill for?
because it's no longer a game.
If some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination?
Depends on who your terrorists are.
The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline?
There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction.
For what possible gain?
The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stockpile against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart-bombed.
I can't believe it. This is about increasing arms sales.
Mm-hmm.
When?
Tonight?
How are you going to stop them?
That's what it looks like.
What does what look like?
Modem protocol. Remote access. Somebody on the ground's flying your plane.
Bogey, sir. Keep your course. I need to know our flight plan.
I'm mapping the data now. Liars, your flight's gonna make an unscheduled stop in exactly 22 minutes.
Corner of Liberty and Washington. Lower Manhattan.
World Trade Center. I'm going to crash the plane into the World Trade Center. I'll tell the flight crew.
There's a video game called Trade Center Defender Game. This came out in early 2001. It's a simulator where you're trying to protect the World Trade Center from having airplanes fly into it. That seems weird. Whether or not that's predictive programming, that's pretty strange. And there's, party music from September of 2001. This came out right before the World Trade Center. And it looks like there's some explosions happening inside the World Trade Center. Vice magazine from 1994. This one is crazy. It's eerie. It's talking about Al-Qaeda. It's explaining who and what they are. But the artwork with the article has clearly the World Trade Center and two airplanes flying into it with Beavis and Butthead as the pilots wearing turbans and looking kind of like Middle Eastern. And they pinpointed Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's who we're told did this whole thing. This is 1994, and I realized that I think the World Trade Center, there was like a bombing, some crazy sheikh or whatever planted a bomb in there back in 93, so maybe it's a little bit on the radar. People are sensitive to terrorism and terrorism reaching our shores, but to get this close with the article and the artwork here, it shows something is going on. I don't know what it is. Some people talk about this thing called a collective conscious, and how, our whole reality and consciousness are interlocked and that we're kind of like weaving together the world as we go. And I don't personally believe that, but I do believe that these things like the World Trade Center attack and major, events that change the whole course of history don't just come from nowhere. This was kind of burning on the back burner for a long time, slowly simmering before it actually happened. So this one here, from the Vice magazine, is incredibly interesting. It's something that even if you think this is all craziness, you're going to raise your eyebrows when you see this one. There's a scene in the movie Dark Knight Rises that some people on the crazier corners of the internet think refers to the Sandy Hook Elementary tragedy. I don't really put a whole lot of weight into it. There is a scene in the movie, though, where they're putting out supplies and they got this big map open and it points right to Sandy Hook, or shown in the map. And like I said, I think that theory is kind of a stretch, but the one thing that is weird, the weird part about this whole thing is that the set designer for that film is a guy called Nathan Crowley. And if you go to his IMDb bio, the trivia question about him is that Nathan Crowley is a descendant of the infamous black magic occultist Aleister Crowley. So I think he's like a grandson of Aleister Crowley, the wickedest man who ever lived. You know, that's what he liked to call himself, or the Beast. He was one of the founders of modern Satanism, and his grandson or relative, not exactly sure if he's his grandson, that's what a lot of people say, but it does say in his IMDb bio that he is a descendant of the infamous Aleister Crowley. So that is kind of weird. Like I said, I'm not really going to go there with the Sandy Hook thing. I think that's stretching it too far. You know, there's just a lot of this uncanny stuff with life imitating art. You know, the big one right now is the Dean Koontz novel, Eyes of Darkness, how in his novel that he wrote in 1981, it's about the Chinese government created this biological weapon, and it's a virus, and the virus was created at a laboratory in Wuhan, which is exactly where, you know, the coronavirus outbreak started. And in the book, the virus gets out, and it's called Wuhan 400. So, I mean, like, are these things coincidental? Is this just, you know, one of those weird things, or is this predictive programming? But, you know, this has been going on for a long time, and you can use we have so much information available to us now that we can find coincidence and things like that anywhere. In some of the older books, like Baron Trump, there was actually a series that were called the Baron Trump novels. Why? That's crazy. So, in the Baron Trump novels, which were published back in like the late 1800s, it's not like the kid lives in the White House or anything, but he's described as precocious, restless, and prone to get into trouble. He often mentions what a large brain he has, and he has a personalized insult for most of the people he meets. Now, I'd be more impressed if some of the insults were like Little Rocket Man or Pocahontas or Shifty Shift, but they're not, so it's not necessarily predicting Trump. Another crazy old story is called The Wreck of the Titan, and it basically describes the sinking of the Titanic, but the book was written well before the Titanic ever actually set sail. In the story about the Titan, The Wreck of the Titan, it's like the largest ocean-going vessel. It strikes an iceberg, it sinks, and there's not enough lifeboats. And that was written in like the 1890s, right? And the Titanic didn't even set sail till 1912. That was its maiden voyage. So that story is very interesting. It's a cool example of what predictive programming is, but isn't, because why would you have to prompt the people for something? Who would have gained by the sinking of the Titanic? And nobody would build a giant ocean liner just to sink it, right? So is there some kind of underlying subliminal messaging that's happening here? And I think in some cases, yes. Now, predictive programming is not a seamless theory, right? There's always going to be contradictions anytime you're considering subliminal messaging anyway. But in some cases, in some of the stuff that we've looked at, I think that you can make the case. You can make a strong case, I think, with the lone gunman thing about the 9/11 events. I mean, you can research 9/11. There are a lot of contradictions in the traditional story. We know that part of the reason that this predictive programming theories are growing, and they grow every time a new one comes out, is that people have a natural distrust of the government and of the mainstream media. And I think that a lot of that stuff is actually well-deserved. The government has been lying to us, and they've been covering things up, and so is the media. I mean, you know, Time Life magazine bought the Zapruder film that showed Kennedy being shot, right? It was like the film, if you see him in the car where he gets shot, that's called the Zapruder film. They bought that, and they buried it for a long time. They didn't let anyone see it. When they did release it, they released it out of order. So I'm not going into the Kennedy thing right now. I'm just saying that anytime there's doubt or whatever, and then the government or the media that you're supposed to be able to trust does something to cast further doubt, people are going to turn to alternative theories to try to figure out what's going on in the world. Anyway, these are just things that I find interesting. So I'm not a great believer in predictive programming on a lot of events. On some events, I think that absolutely. I mean, if you had the power and you had the will and the motives to do it, why not do it? I do think that's happening in some cases. But I hope that you guys enjoyed these videos, and keep coming back. If you haven't subscribed, please become a subscriber. I greatly appreciate it, and I always enjoy the comments. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care.